Ooh, hello. That was a long run over to just Ethan from the Diversity Town Hall or Diversity Roundtable. I apologize. Um, I have a feeling people are just coming in, so we'll just give people a few moments to enter. I see some. Hey, Deirdre, thank you. Thank you all for waiting. I'm so sorry. I was on another panel, which was excellent. Hey, Mike. Hey, Meg. If you're just joining us, please say hello. Let us know you're here. Let us know where you're from. I'm stuck in a hotel room in Los Angeles. I get to go home tomorrow. I've been gone, I guess, 11 days now, 11 or 12 days, and I am ready to go home. Also, the freaking room vibrates every time the air conditioning turns on. And so right now my whole room is shaking. And for the first few days, I thought there was earthquakes. We actually did have an earthquake, one small one. This is not it, but it's shaking now. And I always go, oh my gosh, here it is. It's the big one. Okay, so yeah, say hello. Let me know you're here. We'll get started in just a minute. It's Marilyn from South Louisiana. And okay, so David is on the stream. He's a much beloved board member, but more importantly, we have to give him a big congrats. He just completed his first Ironman, which I actually spectated my first Ironman this summer. For those of you that don't know what it is a 2.5 or 6 mile swim followed by a 112-mile bike, and then you run a marathon. And then I think you probably sleep for a few days. So congratulations, David, on finishing your Ironman. That's freaking incredible. I slept for days just watching an Ironman. So way to go, man. Big congrats to David on his Ironman. And hello from the land down under. I really want to go to Australia. And so we'll have to make that happen soon. All right, still letting a few people come in, but let's go ahead and get rid of the housekeeping really quickly. Let's see here. I'm on a tiny laptop, and normally I have my whole setup, but I don't have that right now. So let's see here. All right, let me just read the quick overview of the housekeeping, and then we can jump in because I know we're running a little late. And again, thank you for hanging and hanging around. And if you just joined the other panel that we just got off of the diversity panel, thank you so much. I thought that was an awesome panel. All right, this town hall. Well, my name is Ethan. I'm a national advocate for the International OCD Foundation, and I also have OCD and won't stop talking about it. This town hall is intended to serve, well, it's not a town hall. This just Ethan is intended to serve as educational content and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The IOCDF is not a crisis hotline and should not be used if you're in distress or feel unsafe. If you're in a crisis or ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the suicide prevention hotline at 800-273-8255. Also, we like to create as safe a space as possible. This is online, being recorded, and will land on multiple social media platforms. So, as always, try to be respectful. We want to keep this as open and honest and vulnerable a conversation. Support one another, but just keep in mind as you talk about personal things in your life that this is also being broadcast publicly. With that, let's get going. I know we're getting started about 14 or 15 minutes late. I just got the word that we can go a little bit after 8 p.m. Eastern. It is still daylight over here on the West Coast. Long time no see, Lana. I agree. So this month's conversation is OCD and co-occurring disorder. Thank you, Kevin, for the question. That was a perfect segue. I appreciate that. So co-occurring disorders can look like hair pulling, skin picking, autism spectrum disorder, social anxiety, substance use disorder, and quite honestly, I'm not a clinician, as many of you know, and I'm not a doctor, as many of you know. So if somebody has the answer, Katie, maybe you do, and Fran, maybe you do as well. I'm not quite sure what the difference is between a co-occurring and then a comorbid condition. In other words, having two. I know we often talk about co-occurring conditions as conditions or related disorders that often are diagnosed or present along with OCD, or very commonly diagnosed with OCD, such as BDD, social anxiety, trichotillomania, hair pulling, skin picking, which is that. There's a list. Related disorders. But so I guess that are in the OCD vein. Depression. But say depression and PTSD, I think can be comorbid disorders. In other words, you can be diagnosed with more than one mental illness, but isn't necessarily a related disorder. Although I could always click on this link and tell you exactly the related disorders are. So I should probably know them since we're leading a conversation on them. But real quick, hoarding disorder, body dysmorphic, body focused repetitive behaviors, the BFRBs, olfactory reference syndrome, PANS. Let's see here. Disorders, autism. Well, there's some that are confused. All right, this is getting way too technical for me. Here's what I'll say. Disorders grouped together with OCD in a chapter in the DSM-5. Thank you, Fran. Appreciate that. So again, they are probably disorders that are common occurrence with OCD. To answer your question, Kevin, I have social anxiety. I have a pretty substantial anxiety disorder that I've had along with OCD. I do have a comorbid disorder. I have been diagnosed, I think 2 or 3 years ago, with bipolar 2. And that was a sort of a new revelation after some hypomania. That's not considered a related disorder, but it is something else I deal with that is managed and is under control. Here's the thing, though, and I will say this, and then, since we're running late, let's just open it up to questions. If you have questions about co-occurring conditions, please ask them. If you have questions about anything else related to OCD, please ask. Yes, Kevin, I am doing great. OCD has been managed and under control for about 11 years now. And the bipolar 2 really didn't manifest in an interfering way until that first time, I guess in 2018, but was quickly under control with the combination of therapy, which I'd already had, and some medication, and life is good. Here's the reality. Is that I really, really don't like to focus too hard on the diagnoses. Labels can be a good thing from a treatment standpoint. I don't necessarily know that they're the best thing once you find out what's going on. Like, it's very relieving to like, oh, there's a name for that, and there's a name for that. But at a certain point, when you start getting 5 or 6 labels thrown at you, it starts to get kind of defeating. Hey, Valerie, right? It gets kind of defeating. It's like, well, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. The reality of it is, and especially within the mental health space, is that the goal is to live a full functional life. So yeah, if a diagnosis or a label helps an individual with OCD or related disorders find treatment and therapy to live a meaningful, full, beautiful life, that's awesome. Beyond that, your job, my job, all of our jobs is to function and live meaningful and live full. And, I talk to a lot of folks, and a lot of folks kind of rattle off their list of co-occurring conditions. I have friends that have 5, 6, 7 conditions along with OCD. But at the end of the day, while they're valid and they matter, at the end of the day, I have the same goal as everyone else, which is like, I'd like to live my life. Who here doesn't want to live their life? So, they're great for diagnoses and things like that. Beyond that, I'm not a big stickler for labels. I just know that I want to do the best I can and do the best I can for others. And I'm sure you do too. And so what do I have to do that? What therapy, what medication, if that's the right choice for you, what avenues are there to do that? Katie wrote, from what I understand in a quick search, comorbidity implies that there is some kind of connection between the two disorders affecting both how they progress and their treatment, while this is not necessarily the case with co-occurring. Awesome. Thank you for the explanation. I'm even more confused now, Katie. So yeah, they have to do with stuff. I probably should have asked ahead of time about leading a conversation on co-occurring conditions, which I am familiar with. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, probably not the most expert, but I'm willing to ask questions and find out. We've clearly got people here that are on standby on Google to answer your questions and provide links and anything else you may need. And Kevin, I'm so glad to hear. Kevin wrote, I've been dealing with the fear of becoming schizophrenic for about a couple of months, about 9 months now. It does not run in my family or anything, but it's one of my biggest fears. Fear of another mental illness, a co-occurring condition, is very common within OCD. And it's no different than fearing a physical symptom or physical illness, cancer. I was always afraid of brain tumors growing up, being sick, things like that. And so, Kevin, that is very, very common. And, the treatment is the same as it would be with any other symptom for OCD, which is exposure response prevention and sitting with the uncertainty that you may or may not develop, schizophrenia. But for now, we know that, you don't have it. You most likely have OCD. I'm assuming you're on here. You may. I don't want to tell you do when you don't, but I'm just making the supposition that you do. And therefore, we're going to sit the uncertainty that, that may or may not happen. Probably it's OCD. We move forward with our lives. The last thing you want to do is you live your life waiting for it, because Lord knows we've all done that. We've all lived our life to some extent, or currently waiting for the thing we're scared of to happen or find out. And, majority of the time it doesn't. So, and yes, Mike, you are correct. Borderline personality disorder, BPD, and OCD can have some overlap as well. I remember when I was being diagnosed and treated at the OCDI, because I would get so dysregulated when I was given exposure response prevention. They would always say to me that I would have some borderline-ish behavior. So I engaged in lots of love over here. I love this. There's so much love going on. And everybody's saying hi, and Nikki's in Dublin. We're having a big party at Nikki's house, by the way. We're all going to Dublin. Everyone's invited. And I don't know if we'll fly or take a cruise. We'll figure it out. But either way, we're all going to Dublin. So with that, yeah, borderline it can be co-occurring, and sometimes it's just symptoms. A lot of these things, it's tricky because, a lot of these different diagnoses in the DSM-5 have similar symptomatology, which is why sometimes it can be a little difficult to diagnose, because you can, manifest, is your fear of something bad happening OCD? Is it general anxiety? Is it social anxiety? Is it, one of a number? Who knows? And that's why it's kind of important to look at the whole picture and get a professional opinion. Not an opinion from someone who has curtains made out of cows. Ooh, very nice. I'm in a hotel. They're not mine. With that, I am more than happy to talk about stories about the day, but let's just open it up. If you guys have questions, if you have conversations, if you have things that you want me to talk about, just fire it in the comments, and let's get something going. How do you know if you have OCD and GAD? Great question. General anxiety disorder. Obviously the best way is to consult a clinician or expert and be diagnosed. There can be overlapping symptomatology with general anxiety disorder. This general feeling of fear and dread, or that something bad may happen, this sense of impending doom, and then subsequently some sort of avoidance behavior to mitigate that feeling. But there are significant differences between OCD and GAD beyond the avoidance behaviors, namely, engaging in significant compulsions, also the specificity around the obsessions themselves, not just a more general fear of something is wrong. But at the end of the day, the best thing you can do, even beyond a Google search and just looking up a definition, is, go through an intake with an expert, and they'll be the best person to determine based on your results, where you sort of lay, and to go from there, and help you give you diagnosis and then treatment. But thank you for that question. I appreciate it. And if you do, with that, if you are looking for someone to help you with that and you're at a loss, we do have the IOCDF has a resource directory. Lots of highs. Everybody's highing. This is awesome. Resource directory where you can access treatment providers, many in your area. You can search by zip code or a map or anything else. Fran will put a link to the resource directory. So So EB, if you, yep, there it is right there. He is on it. So if you do have questions or want to access treatment to help you, give light to some of the things that are going on, then please feel free to visit the resource directory and find a clinician in your area. And that's a great point, Lovelana. Make sure they actually have specific training in OCD if you want an accurate diagnosis. That's a great point. So the treatment for OCD is exposure response prevention. That is the first line gold standard treatment. There are other treatments, but that is the one we want to look for. There's actually, and Fran is probably already ahead of me, there is a great article with a list of questions that you can use to ask a potential therapist that you may want to find out if they properly treat OCD, if you have a diagnosis of OCD. If you're still unsure of whether it's OCD or GAD, I would still find someone that specializes in OCD, because they'll be able to properly diagnose your OCD as well and be able to treat you at the same time. That's how to find a right therapist. And it's important to note, not to get off topic, but don't be afraid to interview your therapist. They work for you. And the last thing we want, and so many of us have done this, is spent thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars getting the wrong therapy. So Alexandra Reynolds, long time no see. It's my friend who lives in Puerto Rico. Kidding. So don't be afraid to ask questions. GUD ERP. How long have you been doing it? Where were you trained? Where did you get your degree from? So on, so forth, so on, so forth. And there's a great article link there that you can answer, that you can find the good questions to ask the therapist out. Kevin asks, so is ERP a way to tackle fears that you encounter? Great question, Kevin. So exposure response prevention. If we break down OCD, obsessions are unwanted thoughts, images, fears that we don't want to have that enter our mind, cause anxiety and a great deal of discomfort. Compulsions are the things that we do to alleviate the anxiety and the uncomfortable feelings, whether that is anything from hand washing to mental reviewing to double checking, turning around that bump that we hit on the road wasn't a person, anything. And guess what? They work. Compulsions work. That's why we do them. I clearly have had a lot of sugar today. Or maybe it was like the hype diversity roundtable that just we had. There was such good energy. I just came over from that. So I'm still like in the zone as opposed to like waiting 30 minutes to get in the zone. So maybe I should do a live before I get on the live. I digress. They work, and the reason they work is because they compulsions do alleviate the anxiety. So that's why we continue to do them. The problem is as we continue to do them, they only last for a certain amount of time. The OCD comes back, the obsession comes back, and therein lies the awful loop, right? So exposure response prevention. A expert, a clinician, will expose you to what your fear is, and then prevent you from engaging in your compulsive behavior, have you sit with the discomfort and anxiety associated with not being able to compulse. And over time, your body will begin to learn that it doesn't need to compulse in order to what they call habituate, that anxiety will go down to a point where you eventually just don't care whether that thing may or may not happen. So inevitably, we're talking about uncertainty. Yeah, Beth wrote it. Sitting with the anxiety after ERP is tough, but it works, and it is very hard. Are you kidding me? It's extremely hard. So that is the gist of ERP, is to sit with the uncertainty. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen. We don't know, but we're going to sit with the discomfort until that anxiety starts to curve. It sounds terrifying. It's not a fun therapy. It's, if you think you're going to go into a clinician's office and lay on a couch and feel way better when you leave, that's not this therapy. But short-term pain, long-term gain, it is so worth it. Invest the pain now. It's worth the pleasure the rest of your life. And so, and there are other modalities of treatment. And I love seeing that, Deirdre. That's awesome. I like ERP marathon. And you'll want to do it. You'll want to challenge the OCD. And I do ERPs every day. They're kind of involuntary at this point, but they work. They work. I love Lana wrote, ERP is also used for people without OCD, but have specific phobias. Incidentally, love Lana, exposure therapy is used for phobias. There's actually, and not running from that, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot of response prevention And that's kind of the difference. So this is important. If you have a therapist that says I do it, or you're searching out a therapist, for your OCD, you have a diagnosis of OCD, and they're like, oh, well, we do exposure therapy with phobia all the time, we can help you. That is still not right for OCD, because there's no response prevention to the compulsion. It is exposing you to the fear without that other half, and that is not effective. You need both. Yeah, yep. And sorry, I'm reading. And no, Ethan, it doesn't sound, it's not fun, but if you look at, I can make some I'm going to slow my roll now, because it isn't fun. But I don't think OCD is fun, and I don't think spending 15 hours a day compulsing and not sleeping and not living a value-driven life is less fun than engaging in ERP. So I highly would choose exposure response prevention. I always say you can go back to the OCD if you want to. But listen, if you're diagnosed with cancer and you're on a protocol of chemotherapy and radiation, that's not fun either, and oftentimes makes you sicker than the cancer. But the end result is hopefully remission and a cure. And that's the same with ERP, not the cure part. OCD is chronic as of right now. But let me tell you something. You can live a beautiful, full life and still have OCD, and not nearly to the degree that you may have had when you were at your worst. So, people hear, what? No cure? Screw that. Like, what do you mean I have to live with this chronic disorder or disease? People live with diabetes and have beautiful lives. They have flare-ups every once in a while, but for the most part, they don't even notice it, and that's the analogy I like to make with OCD is, and at least for me. So Katie wrote, prolonged exposure for PTSD too. Yes, absolutely. EB wrote, thank you, Ethan and Lana. My previous therapist did not do ERP or ACT. For those of you wondering about ACT, that is acceptance commitment therapy. I love ACT. You hear me talk about it all the time. And I'm definitely willing to go into it further. But ACT is awesome, and is also an exposure-based therapy, and in the last 10 years is often used in conjunction with ERP therapy. And so it's a great modality of treatment, and I highly recommend inquiring about it. Also some good books on ACT as well. Ethan, it's only called exposure treatment for specific phobias. Is that what you're saying? Yes, that is what I'm saying. I think that's what I'm saying. And oftentimes exposure therapy is used. It can be used to help anxiety disorders. Phobias are considered, yes, exposure therapy. I got you. Yes, that's usually what's used to treat specific phobias, whether it's fear of flying, spiders, what have you. And thank you, Fran, for the link on ACT. Definitely check it out. The acceptance commitment therapy is amazing, and it changed my life. It really did, and it helped me embrace ERP, which also changed my life. So lots of life-changing stuff here. Vintage wrote, with scrupulosity, I find it difficult to employ the tools that behavioral therapy offer for my anxiety and tics, because for me, it all boils down to fake it until you make it. I'm just reading your addition. This not only makes me feel like a liar, but it adds to my social anxiety because I can feel myself pretending to be this person that I'm not. Sorry, I'm just rereading your first. When you say you find it difficult because I'm a little confused by what you're saying, and I apologize. Maybe it's me. You said it clearly. The moral scrupulous piece, are you feeling like a liar because you're not being who you really are, or you're not acting how you really feel, how you really feel, by your fake it till you make it kind of thing. I just need to put up with it and deal with it. This not only makes me a liar, you said, but it adds to my social anxiety because I can feel myself pretending to be this person. So I'm curious. All right, I just want to make sure I understand your question clearly, Vintage. Are you saying that, you're pretending, when you say you're pretending to be a person that you're not, who is the not person and who is the person that you're pretending to be? because I really want to understand better. And I think this is important for everyone, that OCD very much feels like our identity and it's who we are. When it isn't, it's a disease and it's a disorder. But it gets very enmeshed with our identity. So for instance, Vintage, if you go out pretending you're okay, but inside you're really struggling and suffering, is that what you're talking about? The whole pretending to be okay when you're not, and you just don't like that because that's not how you actually feel? So I apologize for not clearly understanding your question. I just want to better understand what you're asking so I can touch on it, because you're making a great point. I just want to, I need certainty that I understand the question. So thank you. Katie asks, Katie added, oh, okay, let's stick with Vintage. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to bring up something, Vintage. We have to act in the service of the greater good. And the greater good in this case is for you to get better and live the life that you want to live. Okay. So what does that mean? I would argue that the way you feel inside, that pain, that suffer, that struggle, that hurt, that it is valid and it is you, but it isn't you, in the sense that that is the OCD, and you, the individual, have so much more to offer than that. We're talking about being our authentic self. And when it comes to being our authentic self, the way through that with OCD is to move the OCD out of the way so you can be you. And sometimes it's hard to tell what's you and what's your OCD, especially if you've been struggling with OCD for a very long time. I can tell you from my point of view, as far as I know, I was born with OCD. So trying to figure out who I was really hard to discern, because all I knew was OCD. So, when they would be like, it was just very hard for me to tease out Ethan from the obsessive compulsive disorder. As I learned what were my values, it became much easier to better understand who Ethan was. So for instance, Ethan would make plans for next week with his friends, and then the night before or the morning of freak out because he was afraid he was going to get sick, or that he was going to do something wrong or embarrass himself, and would cancel in the moment, at that moment, to make myself feel better and be able to stay home and have the anxiety go away. And at the same time, let my friends down and sometimes piss them off. Okay, fine. So if we look at that in and of itself, then the desire to hang out and be with my friends is Ethan. The need to cancel because of the discomfort is my OCD. So I started looking at those and realizing that the things I wanted to do but couldn't or chose not to do because of the discomfort and anxiety, those were values. The choices that I made to avoid those values was the OCD. And that's how essentially how I separated it for myself. So the short of it, Vintage, is it may feel uncomfortable or even guilty to fake it till you make it. But part of that faking it is living into those values and embracing the discomfort and the uncertainty and engaging in an activity even though you're uncomfortable. And you know what? You don't necessarily have to fake it either. There were so many times when I went into work crying, when I went out with friends upset, and they knew it, but I knew I was doing it for the greater good, for me to get better, right? And it is a process. It's a systematic process. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you have to give yourself grace and compassion around that. At the end of the day, and I don't know, Vintage, whether you're in treatment or therapy or not, but at the end of the day, you don't have to do this alone. You need the skills and tools in therapy to help you move through this. So if you feel like, I'm very passionate about this. If you feel like that you're just grinning and bearing it and going out, then yeah, you're not getting better. You're just kind of pushing that discomfort and uncertainty and putting that fake smile on your face and being like, I'm miserable. Everyone else is having fun. and they don't really know the pain and suffering I'm in, and you just do that over and over again, and it eventually wears you out. The idea of treatment and exposure response prevention specifically is understanding why you're going out and following your values despite how you feel, understanding why you feel that discomfort, understanding what to do with that discomfort, how to tolerate it, why you're tolerating it, things you can do to manage and cope. And doing that over and over again will help you get better. The exposure and response prevention, the acceptance commitment therapy. And whether you're faking it or not in that case, doing that, engaging in treatment and therapy is the most authentic thing you can do, because you're moving the OCD out of the way so you can live a value-driven, full life that is authentically you. So if that helps reframe, I hope it has, because when you're moving forward in the service of treatment and in the service of getting better, even if you're faking how you feel, at the end of the day, you're moving to who you are as an individual, what you have to offer the world, and you're putting OCD in its place. And that is never a bad thing, even if it feels uncomfortable. Katie wrote, ACT is being used for so many conditions right now, even outside of OCD. So it's a great thing for individuals with co-occurring or comorbid conditions to address with their treatment providers. Thank you, Katie, for keeping us on topic. I was honestly hoping most people forgot that was the topic, because clearly I am not knowledgeable enough. I will say, ACT is one of those therapies where you don't need a mental illness to benefit from it. It is one of those things where you learn aspects of ACT and you go, that just makes me a better human being. That just makes me better equipped to deal with life. There are so many things in life that I've had to face, that we've all had to face, that have absolutely nothing to do with mental illness, that I'm just like better at handling because of acceptance commitment therapy. So highly recommended, regardless of what's going on in your life. It's just a great therapy to have in your back pocket. Lana Ropa Vintage, are we not being comfortable unless we're compulsing because the thing that tells us to do compulsions that we wouldn't do without the OCD? Great point, love. Great point. Thank you for that. Yeah, aren't we not being comfortable unless we're compulsing because because the thinking that tells us to do compulsions that we wouldn't do without the OCD scrupula. I mean, that's it, right? Feeling comfortable in the world of OCD is engaging in the compulsion, which is really the OCD telling us, which is not the value-driven thing to do. And fake is not the right word. I don't like the word fake, because OCD is not fake. OCD is a very, very real disease and disorder. But what it does do is it robs you of who you are as an individual. And that is really what is fake, is the lack of you in the face of OCD is a fake version of you, if that makes sense. So not to get too existential here, but the reality is OCD likes to push you down. We want to push OCD away so you can come up and rise and be the person that you are. And so whatever is in the service of that through treatment and therapy and working with a provider is a good thing. Jenny wrote, it's interesting. The person I care about started with autism age 3, then ADD 3rd grade, and now OCD age 16. I see more of the autism social traits now than I ever had before. I become more lost in how to help than ever before. I wish there were books for people to learn techniques that would support. So ERP has begun. Hi, Jenny. So I'll give out my email at the end. I'm actually working with a woman right now who has a child with OCD and ASD, and I don't know that they have an ADD diagnosis. There's some brilliant therapists out there that specialize in OCD and ASD. It really is a more targeted, specific kind of treatment because of the way ASD manifests and interacts with the OCD. I'd be curious to know where you live and where you are with that. Well, in the event that you can't stay on now, go ahead and put up my email, Fran. It's just ethan@iocdf.org. I always give it out at the end, but in the event that you have to run and leave, Jenny, if you email me, I'd be happy to find out where you live and try to connect you with some therapists that are very well versed in treating OCD and ASD. There's also a really good book, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but email me, just remind me of this conversation, and and I'll connect with the IOCDF, and we can try to point you in a direction to help your 16-year-old. And so reach out to me. But thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And it is, but it is very treatable. It is absolutely treatable, and those conditions together are treatable. We've had a couple town halls on co-occurring ASD and OCD, and they've been really good. We've had some lived experience on there talking about her experience. I think it was Mary Wilson, Fran? Is that right? Who was on there? He's probably digging up the live stream right now on OCD and ASD. But email me, let me know where you live, and maybe we can direct you in some expert advice to help you, Jenny. Loved Wanderant, I meant that's not being who we are because we're following this. Yes, what Ethan just said. Okay, I just wanted to support your comment, Lana, but no, we were on the same page. I knew what you meant. EB said you mentioned sleep. Is there any tips on dealing with waking up with intrusive thoughts in the middle of the night? Oh, for sure. I mean, so sleeping in general, for me, I suck at sleeping. Some people call it insomnia. I just like to say that I'm really good at staying awake. It's one of the things I'm really good at. There are definitely things we can do, to help us sleep hygiene, that it's called, as well as how to deal with intrusive thoughts. And, OCD can occur in our dreams as well. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but, being willing to sit with the intrusive thoughts, even if they're terrifying, and be uncomfortable, being comfortable being uncomfortable, even though the middle of the night. Look, it's not uncommon. It's very common to have OCD symptoms spike at night because our brains are quieter, right? We're not as distracted. We're not at work, school, whatever we have going on during the day. And so nighttime can be a tough time. Some people love it because they can sleep, and that's the only time that they're not feeling like they are obsessing or compulsing. For me, that was often the case when I was sleeping. Regardless, there are some things you can do, some grounding exercises that you can do that might help. First of all, I'm a big fan of meditation and a big fan of breathing. So, if you can learn some very simple meditations to help you relax in the moment. Obviously, you don't want it to become compulsive, but the other thing to engage in is, if the intrusive thoughts become intense, if you can't go back to sleep, get out of bed and do something meaningful. Don't try to figure out the intrusive thoughts. Don't try to sit there and ruminate on them. So what I mean by meaningful, is there a book you can read? Is there a movie you can watch? Maybe listen to some music. Engage in something, sort of an active way of resisting your intrusive thoughts. A passive way, just to give you a definition of passive and active, a passive way would sort of be like watching them float by as clouds and just letting them be there, or filtering email, as a spam filter. An active way would be engaging in a movie or taking a walk. And I know the middle of the night can be really, really tough, but I would challenge you to accept that thoughts are thoughts, thoughts are not facts, that feelings are not facts, that feelings are feelings. And the uncertainty and the discomfort, although very uncomfortable and can be terrifying at night, grant yourself the permission to be uncomfortable and to recognize the OCD for what it is, and try to go back to sleep. If you can't, again, mindfulness, some meditation. Oh, the other thing that helps, and these are some DBT and ACT-based, that'd be interesting, ACT-based exercises, is helping you coming back to the present moment. You can do that. A very simple exercise is called the 5 senses, where you sort of look around the room and start to identify things in your room. You start with colors, things you see. You start to notice the colors in your room and start to say them in your mind. The second thing you want to do is things you hear. So, do you hear the air conditioning? Are there birds outside? Do you hear a siren? I'm in LA, like there's sirens every 3 minutes right now, and they're driving me crazy. I can't wait to go back to Georgia where it's quiet. Anyway, is there anything that you smell, touch? Do you feel the sheets in the bed, the way your pillow? There's a sense that I'm missing. Sight. Oh, taste. I don't recommend licking your bed, but even just the taste in your mouth. But what that does is that grounds you, that brings you back, and it forces you to be in the present moment. Doesn't mean the thoughts are going to go away, and that's not the goal of it, is to make the intrusive thoughts to go away. But it does help bring you back to the present moment and ground you a little bit, and should help with that. So hopefully those are some. Also, stimulation before bed can increase intrusive thoughts. And so, if you're a notorious bad sleeper like I am, try to create a cold, dark space to sleep in that's only used for sleeping if it's a bedroom or that other thing that we do in the bedroom, but that's it. Try not to use devices in the bed. Stay off iPads, tablets, iPhones, not only just Apple products, but any electronics. Maybe read before bed if you cannot watch TV. The first like the hour before you go to bed. If you do like to watch TV, try and watch a comedy. Don't watch anything that may give you nightmares or stimulate you, sci-fi, anything like that. These are just all good sleep hygiene techniques. Also, a hot shower before you go to bed is really helpful in just relaxing your muscles as well. Music can calm you down, like I said. So these are all things before bed that will that also help quiet your mind, and they're just good sleep hygiene protocols in general to just help you get a good night's sleep and fall asleep easier. Beth asked, did you notice your friends were different than you? Did you know at a young age that you were acting different from other people? Great question, Beth. It's 4:39 p.m. Oh, you're on it. Yes, I did. And it manifested so early for me. The first thing I noticed is that kids my age, and this is like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, most of the kids weren't afraid to do the things that I was afraid to do. And granted, I don't know everybody's struggle, especially at that age, but for instance, kids were a lot happier to go to school than I was. They were a lot happier to leave their parents than I was. They wanted to go over to their friend's house and spend the night. I was terrified of going over to my friend's house and spending the night. What if I got sick? What if something happened to me? What if my mother died while I was there? I think at that young age for me, and I know it's different for everybody, I didn't necessarily stigmatize myself. I just thought I was different. And I didn't quite understand why. And as I got older, I don't know that I got more answers. I just sort of started to accept that I was different and didn't necessarily, even in high school, see that difference as something that was treatable. Even with the OCD diagnosis, I don't know that I thought of it as treatable, because then I went to therapists that didn't properly treat OCD. So I definitely noticed a difference in my friends, things I couldn't do. I mean, pretty much even in high school, everything that was fun for them was miserable for me. Let's go on spring break. Let's go to the beach. I don't want to leave my mom. I'm scared to death. What if something bad happens? We're going to all go to this party and drink. No, oh my God, I don't want to throw up. I'm not going to drink. Pretty much everything my friends love to do, I was like, hell no. I remember watching Wheel of Fortune with my grandmother. She loved Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. And when we lived close by, I would go over some nights and watch with her. And all the time on Wheel of Fortune, they'd spin the wheel and they'd win a trip. It'd be, you won a trip to Greece or whatever. And they'd be so excited. And I would sit there and go, why are you excited to go to Greece? That sounds terrible. Like, I don't want to travel and be away from my mom and dad. And like, who would want to win? It seems ridiculous. It was part of my mental illness. It's totally not ridiculous, a disease. So to answer your question, absolutely. And I really didn't realize probably until my 20s that it was, a disease and a disorder, even though I had a diagnosis earlier. But as I got older and I started to have to engage in more adult responsibilities, I think the first time it really hit me is when I dropped out of college after 3 months. I really loved college, and I was an acting major, and I was at a very elite acting school, a conservatory program where they only accepted like 20 kids in the country. And I really felt at home. And I went there, and I was having a bit of a honeymoon period for my OCD because it was just a new experience all around. And then 2.5 months in, I got dizzy, thought I had a brain tumor, was scared to death. And my mom had to come to campus and literally stayed in a hotel just so I'd finish the semester. And then I left and didn't go back. And it was then that I realized that, maybe this thing that I have going on, is a problem. And other people aren't necessarily dealing with. Of course, they have their issues of their own. But I was acutely aware that I was struggling with something, and no matter what I tried to do, I couldn't find an answer. So David wrote, OCD has brought old thoughts with new meaning. Has brought old thoughts with new meaning. I know what to do, just have to be patient with myself. Yeah, that's a great point, David. It can bring old thoughts with new meaning, and OCD can bring new thoughts with new meanings, and they can take you on a ride. Especially if you've been coping or dealing with a particular subtype or symptom for a very, very long time, and then it morphs. It feels like a whole nother battle. And the good news is that if you've had treatment or therapy or exposure response prevention, you learn that you can apply that treatment and therapy to that specific subtype or symptom. And that's the beautiful thing about treatment, is really doesn't matter what OCD throws at you. You can employ the tactics, you can employ the skills, the tools in your toolbox, and at the end of the day, embrace the uncertainty or live with that not so just right feeling, and get it under control. Doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean I'm sitting here going, oh, you're OCD morph. You have all the skills and tools. Come on, snap your fingers, feel better. It doesn't mean that I don't get taken for a ride by OCD when it decides to come up with something new that I've never even thought of. And we should do a Just Ethan on that, because one of the things that I like to use as a sort of an obvious sign that it's OCD is if it's familiar. If it's something related to something, have you worried about this before? Or something like this before? Is it a familiar thought? Is it a familiar sensation? Is it a familiar feeling? Is it in the vein of something familiar? When I experience something that I've never had before, never felt before, that's when it scares me, and it pushes me on that roller coaster a little bit, where I kind of have to check in with myself. And some of the arguments that OCD makes is, but you've never felt this before. You've never thought this before. This isn't one of your things. So clearly it's not OCD. You need to pay attention to this. At which point I check in with myself. I check in with my therapist. I just have apparently, but I check in with people to really get a handle on what's going on and what I need to do to address it. And, once I have insight and objectivity into what's going on, I can usually put it to bed pretty quickly. But that isn't to say that, in the moment, it's anxiety provoking and can take you for a ride for sure. But you just have to be compassionate with yourself and get off the ride as quickly as possible. Vintage Road, that makes a lot of sense, guys. ERP taught me to accept the thoughts and let them pass, but CBT has taught me to combat the discomfort with better thoughts. It's just kind of contradicting. I'm going to read it one more time. ERP taught me to accept the thoughts and let them pass, but it taught me to combat the discomfort with better thoughts. So when it comes to OCD, so ERP is part of CBT, right? So what I would argue there, Vintage, and I don't want to say anything against your therapist, but when it comes to OCD, I would lean on the ERP. I would challenge the thoughts. I would learn to let them be there, put them on your shoulder, and move forward with them. We can't treat it black and white, which means that you're going to have many thoughts that have nothing to do with OCD, where CBT may be very, very beneficial. There's nothing wrong with, replacing thoughts with more comfortable thoughts or positive thoughts or anything like that. But we don't want to try to fight the obsessive thought or replace the obsessive thought, because it will keep returning. We really need to take away its power by not giving it attention and showing the OCD we don't really care what it throws at us. So in my opinion, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician, I'm not an expert, but in my opinion, when it comes to OCD specifically, I would always default to ERP. But that doesn't mean, again, that ERP is part of the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy umbrella. That doesn't mean that you can't employ CBT tactics with other thoughts, or even in addition to your OCD and your ERP. I mean, we've all, I was in, learning cognitive distortions and reframing techniques and things like that are all part of cognitive behavioral therapy, are really effective tools in combating OCD. But the first thing is to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and bring it. I'm okay with the thought, and you can be there and you can scream at me, and I'm going to listen to you, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm just going to assume it is OCD, and I'm going to move on with my life. Now, let me reframe. Let me think of some things that I can do, or that some positive things having nothing to do with the obsessive thought that is still there, and we can put that on my shoulder. And I'm not trying to push that away. I'm not trying to push it away and replace it. Just hang out. I don't give a crap. Stay in the back of the bus. I'm going to drive the bus. You can do your thing, but while you're there, let me add some new thoughts to it. Let me think about things that I really care about. Let me think about a date that I have coming up tonight, and what I want to wear, what I want to eat, or what I want to do, or things like that. That I think would be beneficial. Kevin asks, Ethan, don't want to intrude, but really like to hear what your opinion is to my question up top. Was that about the schizophrenia? I don't have an opinion. If you want to specify, you know, but in terms of schizophrenia, I think you asked the schizophrenia question, didn't you, Kevin? Or are you doing better now? Or do I have I answered the co-occurring disorder. Just repeat what the question was. I'm sorry. Let me scroll back down. Let's see, where was I? I apologize. Or is Kevin's question vintage CBT? Okay, there we go. Okay, 443. All right. So we are at 8 o'clock Eastern. I got the okay to go a little bit longer because I know we started late. So, Fran, are you okay with an extra 5 or 10 minutes? Perfect. Oh, the cure for OCD. So, that's what you're talking about. Thank you, Fran. I appreciate that. So as of right now, there's no cure for OCD. It doesn't mean that people aren't trying to find a cure. And again, I don't want to be so stuck on the idea of a cure because, you know, I can tell you that, and I know many people that have pretty beautiful lives. With that being said, I mean, I think the goal is always a cure. And I think that the research and the treatments will continue to get better and better. And there's a myriad of treatments out there. What we're talking about tonight are, you know, behavioral therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies like exposure response prevention, acceptance commitment therapy. You know, but there's also various types of medication that may or may not be an option. There are various types of TMS or deep TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. There's more intrusive surgeries like deep brain stimulation. So there are lots of options. I can tell you this is I've had the good fortune of working with some really brilliant minds in the field in the last few years, both in OCD and pharmacology, in treatment and epidemiology. And I will tell you that people are working. Now, let me share this with you actually, because it was something that really meant a lot to me. And maybe we'll just end with this. I just want to quickly make sure I'm not missing any major questions. I want you all to hear this though, because this really helped me. So I can't say who, but I've been working with a company on a development of a new drug for OCD. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But I was talking to the CEO of this company who by trade is a psychiatrist and for a long time ran the OCD research lab at Yale. And we were talking about treatment-resistant OCD. In other words, OCD that doesn't respond to treatment. And I like to remain optimistic and say that, you know, there's no such thing as treatment-resistant OCD, that it can all be treated. But he said something so powerful, and hearing it from a clinician, a scientist, and a doctor, an MD at that, really made a difference. He said, you know, I don't believe anyone is treatment-resistant to OCD. I believe that it is science's responsibility to catch up, to have better treatments, to be able to treat the more difficult cases. It is not the patient's responsibility to do better or be better. It is our responsibility to do more research and reach the task of treating those that aren't responding to the treatments that are available. And it really, for somebody with OCD and somebody that had, you know, that could argue in my own case that, you know, I had treatment-resistant OCD and had to go through pretty significant trial by fire or extenuating circumstances to sort of overcome, even though there weren't any surgeries, there's still treatment and therapy. That was very destigmatizing to hear that, because so many of us feel like we fail treatment, whether that treatment is ERP or ACT or medication. I mean, how many medications have we all been on? If you are, you know, we feel like that we are too broken, and that we are too sick, and we are failing at these treatments. And to hear somebody at his level talk about the fact that we're not failing anyone, it's them that are failing us, and that science really has to catch up. Really meant a lot to me, and I haven't talked about it but I'm sharing that with you because if it meant a lot to me, hopefully it will mean something to you as well. What I can tell you what's on the horizon without breaching any, without getting arrested by the FBI, is that a lot of companies right now are working on targeted treatments. So hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, gone are the days of like, try this med, now let's go up, let's go down, and titrate this way and titrate that way, and I'm not sure, and okay, let's try this one now. Where they can do a PET scan of your brain, see where everything's lit up, look at the targeted areas and go, okay, based on this, I know that this particular drug or this particular treatment and this dose or in this range will work for you. So we're going to try that. That to me is very optimistic because, I don't like feeling like a lab rat, and, the good psychiatrists do their best to not make you feel that way. But how can you not? Here, try this, up it, down it. It makes you feel like crap, like, what are you doing? How do you not know to just give me medication and make it work? And like, well, this is ridiculous. The idea of targeted therapies, and we've seen this in cancer as well. When they target tumors, before it was, you're radiating the entire body, and now you're radiating such a specific point in regards to tumors. So in this case, I really like the idea of targeted treatments and therapies. I think that we're on our way to OCD and cures, and hopefully, in however many years they can look at the gene sequence, because I think it comes down to gene mapping. Honestly, they can look at the sequence and go, well, there's the OCD. Let's just pluck that out of the sequence and it's gone. But there's some really promising treatments on the horizon. There hasn't been a new drug in 27 years. Now there's research happening around it, and hopefully that will beget more and more research. So I'm very optimistic. But with that in mind, I can't say it enough. And it isn't me like selling a bill of goods. A lot of days out of the weeks, I forget I have OCD completely. Other days it's loud but manageable. And I will take that, I will take that every day. And I know when you're in the struggle and you're in the midst of it and you're in treatment, it can feel like I don't want to live like this every single day. This is exhausting. And the reality is, if you really engage in the treatment, if you really embrace it, if you really give yourself over to it and be willing to be scared, for lack of a better word, shitless, you can get better and you can get there. And I truly, truly, truly believe that everybody has the potential to get to a place where OCD is not dictating the majority of your decisions or how you choose to function or how you choose to live, that you can live with discomfort. You can have good days even though you don't feel good. I really, 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 I couldn't say it more sincerely that I believe everyone can get there, because I did. And I didn't believe I could. I believed from the bottom of my heart that OCD was going to kill me. I've said that before and I'll say it again. And it not only did it not kill me, but the life that I have today is far more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And I'm not saying that every day is perfect. I'm not saying that I don't compulse. I'm not saying that I don't have obsessive thoughts. And I'm not saying that, I just live in this. But what I can say is, I'm living a life that I never imagined for myself. Whether it lasts or not, I don't know. I have to live with the uncertainty, but it wouldn't have happened with an amazing team and a willingness to change and the eventual belief that you can change. And so I leave you all with that. Let me pull up the old document here and just some quick housekeeping. Well, first of all, thank you. This was a great conversation, and the text, the messages were awesome. Sorry, I'm reading Love Lana's comment. Email me on that, Lana. Okay, so anyway, I want to be cognizant of Fran's time, and I appreciate you everyone saying. So first of all, thank you to the IOCDF, as well as Fran behind the scenes for being the master of all things digital, virtual, and otherwise. He is an amazing dude, and we couldn't do most of the stuff we're doing without Fran. So registration is open for the online OCD conference taking place October 8th to the 10th. You can learn more and register at onlineocdconference.org. I know that website is original. I didn't think of it. That's a joke. Also, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern is Chris's Corner lead advocate Chris Tronson will be hosting a conversation on gender identity OCD. So that is tomorrow. And yes, for all our upcoming programming, you can visit IOCDF. It's been a long week, guys. IOCDF.org/peace of mind for all upcoming programming. And with that, if you haven't already, you want to be notified about all the programming the IOCDF is having over the next month, be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook and YouTube. You can also follow on Twitch. Wait, no. No? All right. Anyway, let me just take a quick glance back at the comments. Thank you all for a really beautiful discussion. I appreciate each and every one of you. There is help. There is hope. Oh, my gosh, email addresses. If you want to email the IOCDF, please don't hesitate to ever email them please don't hesitate to email them at info@iocdf.org. You can also email me at justethan@iocdf.org. That is my email. I check it directly. Just give me a few days, but I will always get back to you. So if you had any questions that weren't answered or want follow-up questions or have suggestions about future shows or live streams, hit me up there and we can talk. With that, have a beautiful rest of your Tuesday evening. Thank you for joining me. Stay safe, stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night.